Back to Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. You know, one thing we've tried to do on this show right from the get-go, and we're only 2 weeks in, is bring on, you know, I'm not going to call him the voice of the fan, but guys that, you know, are not beholden to some team, right? And so, you know, we have Zim Hude, of course, on at least once a week. Enormously popular, the segments we have with him. We've had Reuben Brown was a great player, but he does a podcast for the Buffalo Bills, right? So he was on with us. Not so much the voice of the fan there, but we had, what was the cat's name in Dallas?
Voch Lombardi.
Yep. I mean, he was on his game, totally on his game, and another guy today.
We had Matt Lane.
Yeah, Matt Lane from Kansas City. That's right. He was great. Previewing that game last Thursday night between the Chiefs and the Chargers. But now we go to the host of Just Jets podcast, Mr. Matt O'Leary. Matt, how are you today, my friend?
Doing good. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
You're welcome, and thank you for joining us on such late notice. What a game for the Jets the other day. That was one of the most incredible things in sports, and all of us have seen a lot of sports. That was one of the most unbelievable endings to a game the last 2-3 minutes that I've ever seen.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think most people thought the game was over when Nick Chubb runs into the end zone with 1:55 left, and then, you know, what I thought was initially a garbage time touchdown to Corey Davis, and then turns into an onside kick and a final drive to Garrett Wilson coming up with a game-winning catch. And next thing you know, you blink and the Jets are up 31-30. One of the best comebacks that I've seen from this New York Jets team in a very, very long time. It was exciting. The Jets haven't won a game in September in 4 years, so long overdue, that's for sure.
You're kidding me. In 4 years?
Sam Darnold's first game, 2018, was the last time the Jets won a game in September.
That might have been the only game he won at quarterback.
It felt that way. Watching him for 3 years,
I'm sure it did.
It felt that way.
I'm sure it did. Hey, so Robert Saleh, who I was around him a lot when I was doing NFL games every week, and we had a lot of 49ers games, and he's a very impressive guy, Midwest guy from Michigan, you know, grew up there, tough guy, and a smart guy. Correct me here now, Matt, if I'm wrong, but skimming over after the first week loss of the year, which was not a pretty game, a loss, but they come back with a win and give him credit. You know, he basically said, hey, you know, I'm going to remember all the guys out there that are throwing in the towel on this team already 1 week into the season. I can't remember what his quote was specifically. But what was your reaction to that? Those were pretty bold moves, I thought, for a guy who's only in his second year as a head coach, especially in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought, oh no, here we go. You're going to give a quote to the New York media that they're just going to run with. I didn't personally care for it. My initial take was, can we win some games first before we talk about taking receipts? Because the receipts are going to be as long as one of those CVS receipts that just seem like they're never ending. So it was a little frustrating, but you know what? To his credit, the team backed him up. It was an improbable win, but they were still able to come back and win in improbable fashion. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised with those comments. But if they keep winning games like that, then you know, who knows? But yeah, the media definitely ran a little wild with it on the back pages here in New York. So that was fun.
All right, lots to talk about with this game coming up this week. As you well know, it is panic central here in Cincinnati after going to the Super Bowl last year. Your first two games are against teams that have Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback, followed by Cooper Rush at quarterback, and you lose. And now all of a sudden, this is like a game for Bengals fans where they say there's no way you can lose this game. From a Jet standpoint, just the vibe, the fan base, you clearly are dialed into all that just looking at the room you're sitting in. I mean, that looks like Jets headquarters there. Is all of a sudden this is like one of those games where maybe the year, you know, before it started, you're saying no chance we win that game, to now all of a sudden, hey, we're at home, we're playing well, we're coming off a big win, we got a chance.
100%. I think when you look at the Jets' first four games, when the schedule initially came out, it was weird. They're playing all AFC North opponents right away. You had Baltimore in week one, then you had Cleveland last week, Cincinnati upcoming in week three, and then Pittsburgh in week four. I think absolute best case scenario for this team, even the most optimistic of fans was saying, if you can go 2-2 over that stretch, that would be great. And the Cincinnati game was definitely not one of those games where I thought, okay, the Jets could win. I thought, Cleveland without Deshaun Watson is a spot where maybe they could win. Maybe in Pittsburgh also with Mitch Trubisky or a rookie Kenny Pickett. Those are probably your two best spots. But I think when you look at how much the Bengals offensive line has struggled in the first 2 weeks of the year, this could potentially be a pretty good matchup for the Jets defensively, because Robert Saleh is someone who really prioritizes that defensive line. You have Quinnen Williams, who you took third overall in 2019. You paid Carl Lawson a ton of money to come in here and get after the quarterback. You traded up for Jermaine Johnson in this year's draft class. You paid John Franklin Myers some big money to remain as an interior rusher. Like, if there's ever a time for this defensive line to prove their worth, it's a game like this. Now, I'm not saying that the Jets are definitely pulling the upset, or I think it would be pretty unlikely if they did. They upset them last year, and to do it, twice in a row seems pretty improbable. But I think there is a path to victory in this game for this Jets team. I don't think it's going to be a pushover game. And the Bengals team's desperate. They need to win this game to get back on track. So obviously they're going to come in motivated, but I don't expect the Jets to lay down and be a pushover just because this is the former AFC champions from last year.
Well, you have a couple of very important cogs in that AFC championship team, now putting on the green and white of the New York Jets. Tight end C.J. Uzomah, healthy again. Great guy. I mean, they love this guy here in Cincinnati, and so much a part of the very fabric and the soul and the spirit of a team. He's gone. Now he's in New York. And then there's Carl Lawson, and you wonder, is there a little extra edge, or maybe they haven't been time to ask those guys about that yet with this upcoming game against the Bengals?
Yeah, I really hope so. Carl Lawson was someone who I was really excited to see last year when he was brought in. Unfortunately, got hurt and missed the entire year. But I think, I'm sure you guys know what he can do when he's on and screaming off the edge. And Uzomah, he was injured this past week and didn't play. Didn't have a huge role in week one, but he's just a reliable veteran. And like you said, very well liked, respected in the locker room. And if you're trying to change a culture from a team that's just, always seems to be a bottom feeder to trying to get this thing going in the right direction, you need some veterans who can help you out. And Uzomah is the perfect guy for that. And, once he's back and healthy, I would expect him to be a bigger piece of this offense.
Brandon, Casey, you guys have something for Mr. O'Leary?
I was going to ask about Sauce Gardner, because obviously we watched him here at the University of Cincinnati. What has his relationship been like with the fans and also, just the New York media? I mean, he wants to be flashy, and he's a top 5 pick. What's it been like with him up in New York so far?
The fans absolutely love Sauce Gardner. He was taken, obviously, very high as the 4th overall pick. But he has very much so lived up to the expectation early, obviously, but in training camp, very much so looked the part, looked really good in the preseason, didn't allow a catch. In the first 2 games, he's been solid as well in coverage. And, everyone knows the stat from his time in Cincinnati. He didn't allow a touchdown in his entire collegiate career. I don't expect him to go his entire NFL career without doing that, but He's definitely lived up to the hype so far. He is a fan favorite. The media loves him, and his teammates seem to love him as well.
Yeah, so I have a question for you, Matt. And this one's, to me, a little bit interesting because right now you got Joe Flacco, did really well against the Browns. Not so much against the Ravens, but we'll give him a pass. That's a really good team. If Joe Flacco continues to play like he has been, let's say they go 3-1. They beat the Bengals. They beat the Steelers. Is there a conversation where we say, well, let's let Joe Flacco play, let Zach kind of sit back and just let's ride this Joe Flacco train? Is that a possibility? Is that something is that a conversation that's currently happening right now?
From some Jet fans, yes. Some fans, they're just so tired of the losing that they'll take anything, even if it's 37 or 38-year-old Joe Flacco. Me personally, I don't think that's a sustainable plan. I think it would be a criminal disservice if you come out of this year and you still don't know what Zach Wilson is, because you tried to ride out the hot hand of Joe Flacco, who is very much so on his last leg. I appreciate him for coming in here and playing some good football against the Cleveland Browns, and maybe, like you said, maybe he does against Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. Hopefully Wilson's back for the Pittsburgh game, but I think at that point you just have to say, thank you for coming in and doing your job as the backup quarterback, but we have to turn things back over to Zach. Like I said, they invested way too much in the second overall pick to just let him sit behind a veteran like Flacco. They're not a spot where, it's like the 49ers, who were a playoff team last year and, could potentially be in playoff contention again. This is all about growth, and the young team has to grow together, and the quarterback is a major part of that. So I think Wilson comes back in when he's healthy.
All right, Matt, before we let you get out of here, give us an overall thumbnail sketch, if you would, of the strengths and weaknesses of this Jets team. So Bengal fans, have a chance to know a little bit more about this team. There'll be a lot written and a lot said and so on and so forth, where they can do that throughout the rest of this week. But coming into the season and now through 2 games, what would be the 2 strengths and the 2 primary weaknesses of this team so far?
Yeah, for me, I'll give you one on each side of the ball. Offensively, I think a strength is just their young playmakers. We saw Garrett Wilson break out, and they're deep at the wide receiver position. Maybe not as deep as Cincinnati, but there's some solid players there. Elijah Moore was good last year. Corey Davis is a steady receiver. Braxton Berrios is a good gadget guy and special teamer. So I think there's not just one guy that you can focus on. They have the ability to spread the ball around a little bit, and the positive on the defensive line, on the defensive side, would be the defensive line. I would say they have the potential to be a team that could really wreak havoc. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, against Cincinnati's offensive line, which has struggled a little bit, I would be a little bit concerned with the Jets defensive line rotation, which they like to rotate heavy and keep these guys fresh. I think that's something that could play a major factor in this game. Now for weaknesses, on the offensive side, they are starting a 4th-round rookie at right tackle in Max Mitchell. He's been a little bit up and down, and I think if you could potentially exploit that and take advantage and get after Flacco, who at this point isn't really very mobile, that could be an area for the Cincinnati Bengals defense to thrive. And then on the Jets defensive side of things, they really struggle against the run. The linebacker core took a step back this past week. CJ Mosley's getting up there in age. You have Quan Alexander, who's pretty solid, but beyond that, there's a lot to be desired at the linebacker position. So if they get Joe Mixon going early and potentially in the screen game also, I think that would be a path of success for the Cincinnati team.
Well, look, they haven't gotten anything going against anybody through the first 2 weeks. That's not to say that can't change. Hey, I'm just curious, real quick, to ask you before we let you go. How much did and you talked about having a rookie right tackle, right? But we're just playing a little game here, because I was highly critical of Zach Taylor not playing a single starter, offense or defense, for 1 snap during the preseason. Not one. Now, the Jets are a little bit different situation. They're not coming off a Super Bowl where you played into February and all that kind of thing. Okay, I get all that, and that's a big part of this question. But did guys on both sides of the ball play at least a decent number of snaps in the preseason, especially the offensive line?
Not really, no. And that was one of my biggest criticisms of Saleh in the preseason. The offensive line really didn't play that much together at all, which is why I think they struggled a little bit the first couple weeks of the year. Now, there were some injuries, like Mekhi Becton was supposed to be the starting right tackle. He goes down. Then they signed Wayne Brown, who's supposed to come in and play left tackle, and then they were going to move George Fant from the left side back over to the right side. And then Dwayne Brown gets hurt, so then Fant goes back to the left side, and then Max Mitchell starts. So there's been a lot of moving pieces on that offensive side of the ball, and they really, on the line specifically, and they haven't played a ton of snaps together. So I do think that has to do with some of the struggles to that unit at least.
All right, fair enough. Matt, again, thank you so much for joining us, especially on such short notice. And we'll look forward to seeing you sometime down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me on. It was a ton of fun, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
All right. I'll look forward to it. Matt O'Leary, all about the Jets, Just Jets podcast. And so check that out. I mean, if you want to learn more about what's going on with the New York Jets, that's a guy you're going to go to. He's got the podcast going.